This instrument that I'm holding in my arms like a baby is called an auto harp. You want to try that word out? Auto harp. Now say it like this. Auto harp. That's how my dad says it. Well, I'm looking for some long-time friends. I'm looking for some long-time friends. Life's a long and twisted road, many turns and unseen bends, so I'm looking for some long-time friends. Well, good friends tend to slip out of your reach. Walk too fast or keep too straight a path. With your eyes so far ahead that you can't see by your side, you will never find your long-time friends. If you want to come in on the chorus, that'd be good. I'm looking for some long-time friends. Here we go. Well, I'm looking for some long-time friends. I'm looking for some long-time friends. Life's a long and twisted road. Life's a long and twisted road, many turns and unseen bends. I didn't see half of them coming. I'm looking for some long-time friends. Life's a long, long road with many ways to live. Many ways to love and ways to give. I'm not so sure I want to find just one soul to blend with mine, so I'm looking for some long-time friends. Come on in. Well, I'm looking for some long-time friends. Looking for some long-time friends. Life's a long and twisted road, many turns and unseen bends, so I'm looking for some long-time friends. Sing that again. Yes, I'm looking for some long-time friends. Well, long ago, in Japan, there was a woman and a man, and they had 2 daughters. And the older daughter drowned in an accident, and the family turned their attention to that younger daughter, held her close, wrapped her in their love. And she grew up missing her sister, thinking about her, but eventually she started to feel that so much like she wasn't so alone. And in that time and place, she also had a friend from school, a young boy, and they grew quite close. And there were times when the village saw her with that young man, and they'd say, someday maybe they will make a good marriage. But her father never thought like that, because he did what all fathers did in that place, which was he was keeping his eye to arrange a marriage. And he made an arrangement without her knowledge for an older gentleman from another village. And when she was in her early 20s, unknowing that she had a secret sweetheart, he invited the man to come, and he introduced him to her, and he said, "This will be your husband." And following the rules of that time and place, she knew in her heart that she needed to go and see her sweetheart and tell him that she would never be able to marry him. And so on the next day, she went to see him, and she said, "You and I cannot have the long life together that we have dreamed of. I must marry the man that my father has found and arranged for me." And her sweetheart knew that he could not stay living in that place and watch her have a life with another man. And so he went home and he packed his things, pushed them into soft cloth bags, and loaded them into a long, slender boat, and went out to the boat, climbed in, and he started to make his way upriver. And she could feel at her house that he was going. And about 2 hours going upriver, 2 hours going up, he became aware of a sound of feet running on the side of the river's edge. And he pulled the boat to shore, and she came running out of the trees, and she said, "I have come to go with you. I cannot stay and live in this place and marry that stranger. I'm going to go with you." He said, "Get in my boat." And they got in and they went up the river. And they married and they had 2 children. And 6 years later, she came to her husband and she said, "I am ready to go home and to face my mother and father and introduce our grandchildren to them." And he said, "All right." And they packed their things up, pushed them in that boat, and they started downriver. Now, several hours later, as they started to get close, he began to get a little worried, and he said, "Look, when we arrive, I want you to stay in the boat and stay with our children, and I will go to your father's house and see how it is for us. All right?" She said, "All right." And so he went alone to their house, and he knocked on that old familiar door, and it was opened, and her father was there. And the young husband could see that he had aged after they'd gone, and not just from time, but some kind of sorrow. And when the father saw that young man there outside his door, he had a shock on his face, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And the young man said, "Well, your daughter Senjo and we've come back. And we have children, and we want you to meet the grandchildren." And the father said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Senjo, my youngest daughter, has been sick in bed for 6 years." He said, the father said, "I will go to our boat, and I will bring her to your house." And the father just shook his head and closed the door. The young man went down to the boat, and the father went into the room where Senjo had been sick in bed for 6 years. She was pale. Her eyes were closed. And her father stepped up close to the bed, and he spoke with her. And the young husband, he went down to the boat, and he got his wife, Senjo, and her daughters, and their daughters, and they came back up, and he knocked on the door, and the father opened the door, and they stepped in, and the father said, "I don't understand this." He said, "Senjo has been sick," and his daughter walked right past him and stepped into the room where she was lying in bed. And as soon as Senjo in the bed saw the woman in the door, she started to throw off the covers. And she stepped with her feet on the floor. And Senjo in the doorway stepped forward. And the woman in the bed got up. And they walked toward each other. And they became one. This story has a sentence attached to it. It is called a koan, a Zen teaching. It is a sentence that's given from one teacher to a student, and the student is asked to spend time with it. And that story is the story that is associated with the sentence. So the sentence goes like this. Senjo and her soul are separated. Which is the true one? Senjo and her soul are separated. Which is the true one? Now, there's times, not so much lately, but there are many times when I have been loading my car at home to drive into Los Angeles, which is a very scary place. Cars go really fast on either side of you, and it's noisy. But there are times when I'm loading my car and I will just stop and I'll think, Angela, it's really pretty out. It's a bright blue sky. The sun is warm. And you're walking around here like you're sick in bed, when you could be upriver having a family. And I completely cheer up. And it completely changes how the rest of my day goes.